It was a sweltering July morning in Maplewood, Georgia, when I walked into the county courthouse, my heart pounding like a war drum. My daughter, Lily, 15 and fearless, sat beside me, clutching a folder of evidence that could unravel a web of lies spun by Margaret Hensley, the iron-fisted president of the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association. Margaret had forged deeds to steal our family's land, a quiet acre of oak and clay where my father had built our home with his own hands. But when she slapped Lily in open court, right under the judge's nose, I didn't wait for justice. I picked up the gavel and made it myself. This is the story of a father pushed too far, a community silenced by fear, and the moment truth broke through like a hammer through glass. If you've ever wondered what happens when a man says, "Enough," keep reading. Our land wasn't much to outsider, some modest cabin, a gravel driveway, and a tire swing Lily still used. But it was ours, passed down from my father, who'd cleared it decades before Pine Ridge's manicured lawns sprouted nearby. Trouble started with a letter, embossed with the HOA's crest, signed by Margaret Hensley. It declared our home non-compliant with zoning laws and demanded we vacate. Pine Ridge didn't exist when my father built here, so I dug into the county records. That's when I found it. A deed, supposedly signed by my father, selling half our land to the HOA. The date? 6 months after his funeral. The signature was a clumsy fake, and my blood ran cold. I'd seen betrayal in my years as a mechanic, fixing rigs for men who'd cheat their own kin, but this was personal. Someone was erasing my family's name. I showed the papers to Lily. Her hazel eyes narrowed. "We're staying, right, Dad?" she asked. I nodded, rage simmering. They'll regret ever touching us. The next day, I filed a lawsuit against Margaret and her HOA. She didn't blink. Instead, she struck back, cutting our water line in the dead of night. I woke to a muddy yard and a broken valve, locked with an HOA-issued padlock. When I called the county, they claimed I'd requested emergency maintenance. Another forgery. Margaret's game was clear: break us with bureaucracy. She sent fake fines for our fence's height, called Lily a disruptive influence at school, and even parked her polished SUV on our drive to lecture us. "You're an eyesore," she sneered, her manicured nails glinting. "And that girl of yours, loitering like a delinquent? I'll have her banned from the community park." I stepped closer, voice low. "Touch my daughter, and I'll dismantle your little empire, board by board." Her smirk faltered, but she wasn't done. Days later, Lily was pulled from class, accused of threatening a student based on an anonymous tip. Margaret was testing me, pushing to see if I'd crack. She didn't know I'd rebuilt engines under pressure, raised a daughter alone after my wife's death, and carried a fire that no HOA could douse. The court date loomed, and I was ready to burn her lies to ash. The courthouse smelled of wax and tension. Margaret strutted in, her navy blazer crisp, her entourage of HOA lackeys trailing like shadows. She waved at the clerk like they were old pals. "Let's make this quick," she chirped. "I've got a meeting at noon." Lily sat beside me, her hands steady despite the bruise on her cheek from a school incident Margaret's tip had caused. I clenched my jaw, waiting for our moment. The judge, a tired man with wire-rimmed glasses, called the case. Margaret's lawyer, all charm and venom, painted me as a troublemaker who defied community standards. I stood, holding the forged deed. "This contract's a lie," I said, voice cutting through the room. "My father was dead when this was signed. That's fraud, plain and simple." Murmurs rippled. Margaret leaned back, legs crossed, unfazed. "With all the papers I sign," she said loudly, "mistakes happen. Dead men's scribbles aren't my concern." The judge's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. I sat, plotting. Tomorrow, Lily would testify. Tomorrow, Margaret would face the truth. But I didn't know she'd cross a line no one could ignore. At 9 a.m., Lily took the stand, her voice clear despite her nerves. She wore her mother's old cardigan, looking small but unbreakable. "I saw Miss Hensley with 2 men in our yard," she said. "She signed a paper using Grandpa's name, months after he passed. She said it'd make the zoning airtight." Margaret scoffed, loud enough to draw glares. The judge warned her, but she didn't wait. She stood, heels clicking, and hissed, "This is ridiculous. You're letting a child slander me." The prosecutor objected, but Margaret charged the stand, screaming, "You little liar. You think you can ruin me?" Raised in that dump. Then it happened. Her hand cracked across Lily's face, the sound sharper than a gunshot. Lily stumbled, hitting the stand's edge, blood trickling from her lip. The courtroom froze. The bailiff hesitated. Margaret sneered, "Your family's trash." Tom didn't slow, it burned. I stood, chair scraping, and crossed the room in seconds. The gavel was there, heavy, real. I grabbed it, voice low. "You touched my blood. Now you'll feel justice." Margaret laughed, daring me. I yanked her blazer, spun her against the defense table, and swung. Not at her head or raised arm took the blow. A sickening crunch echoed. She screamed, collapsing, her wrist shattered. The bailiff lunged, taser drawn, but I turned, calm. She assaulted a minor in front of a judge. "Arrest me, and you're obstructing justice." He stopped. Margaret crawled, sobbing, her blazer stained red. I dragged her to the courtroom's center, slamming the gavel into the floor. "This is where my daughter bled," I said. "This is where your power ends." The judge, voice shaking, ordered me to step back. I dropped the gavel and knelt by Lily. "I'm okay," she whispered, eyes fierce. Margaret wasn't. She was a bully who'd picked the wrong fight. Margaret woke in a hospital, cuffed to the bed, her wrist in gauze. Agent Laura Bennett from the DOJ stood over her. "You're under arrest," she said. "Assault, forgery, impersonation, obstruction." Margaret whined. "I'm the victim. He attacked me." Bennett didn't flinch. "Cameras caught you hitting a child. Your injuries came from lawful defense." I listened from the hall, Lily safe downstairs with a nurse. Margaret's empire was crumbling. She'd built it on fear-fake fines, forged deeds, but now she was just a criminal in a gown. The judge ordered her to scrub the courtroom floor where Lily's blood had dried. Margaret, in a torn blazer and cast, knelt with a bucket, cursing as she worked. I watched, pointing at a stain. "That's from Lily's lip. You hit her hard." She flinched but scrubbed, her myth of power gone. The community watched via live stream, every fined homeowner seeing her fall. A week later, 300 residents gathered on the courthouse lawn for a vote. The clerk announced a referendum to ban Margaret from all HOA roles. She stood, hollow-eyed, and ranted, "You need me. I made this town better." I stepped forward. "No, you taught us fear." I showed them what it costs. The vote was unanimous, 289 to 0. Margaret was banned, forced to write a public apology. The crowd chanted justice, and she shrank, a tyrant with no throne. The HOA sign was torn down, spray-painted with fraud. Our land was restored, the deed voided in a public ceremony. Lily smiled again, her bruises fading, her spirit iron. At a community picnic, I spoke to neighbors who'd once stayed silent. I swung that gavel. I said, not to break the law, but to break the lie that law works without courage. They clapped, heavy with relief. That night, I returned to the courtroom, empty but alive with echoes. The gavel sat behind the bench, a faint crack in its handle from when I'd struck the floor. A note was taped beneath, penciled words, "Sometimes justice needs a fist." I smiled. Margaret had taught Maplewood oppression. I taught it spine. Lily waited by our truck, eyes bright. "Home, Dad?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. We drove past oaks and stars, our land quiet, whole. Justice had landed, not in a verdict, but in a father's stand. This isn't just about one HOA tyrant. It's for every parent who's watched their child hurt while others looked away, every family crushed by rules bent against them. Margaret hid behind power, but fear only lasts until someone fights back. What would you do if injustice touched your family? Would you wait for the system or stand up? Share your thoughts below. Do you think violence can ever be justice, or does it only fuel more pain? Drop enough in the comments if you believe some lines can't be crossed, and let's talk about where you draw the line. Like, subscribe, and join us for more stories that challenge what's right and what's real.